to get started. So I'm going to record the call, and then if you guys want, you don't have to take notes. You can just listen along. And if you want to be able to refer to it later, I'll share the link. I'll post that up, and you'll have access to it that way. So, how to get lean. So why this topic? Well, this is the number one reason that people go to the gym. And so I know most of you through the gym, and those that I haven't connected with yet, you'll have a maybe going to a gym, you're training somewhere, and that is the number one reason that people go. We also go to address injuries, and sometimes it's for sports performance, and that can be also for general health. But that's the main reason that we go there. And but it's important that we have context about what are we talking about when we say get lean. Uh, so this is probably dating myself a little bit. Anybody of my vintage or whatever, you'll remember that show, Different Strokes, and Arnold. What are you talking about, Willis? So, we say get lean. We're not talking about getting skinny. We're not talking about just losing body mass. We're trying to lose fat mass. We're trying to keep as much of our fat-free mass as possible. In other words, we want to maintain our muscle mass. So it's not just to get a lower number on the scale and see our mass diminish. It's a combination of decreasing our fat mass, but also trying to maintain or even increase our fat-free mass, our muscle mass. And so, with that, so what do we mean by lean? We're talking about it from a healthy context, that we're healthier when we're leaner, that we're specifically talking about lowering our body fat. And this has got to be through an intentional loss. It can't be because of disease or some other severe caloric restriction. It can't be due to a rapid reduction. We want to do things at a controlled pace, and we want to do it at a controlled rate and pace. The magnitude and how quickly it happens, that have to be at certain conditions and levels. When it exceeds those, sometimes then we lose that condition of this is healthy. And those can be extreme cases. If it's purposeful, maybe it's somebody trying to get ready to be on a stage, like a bodybuilder or something like that. That's not my goal, and that's not typically the people we work with. And so in that case, we're not looking for that extreme loss. And we're also not trying to do it very quickly. But part of being lean, we do want to see high levels of muscle mass. And the other context here to put in place or to make sure that we all agree upon, this is for adult populations. We shouldn't see, children or teens really being concerned with being lean. That at those ages and stages of development in life, it's more about growing naturally, growing into your body, and trying to take focus that emphasis off for young people to worry about that at all. And so it's important to have that context in there so that we run into problems and create any other health issues if we feel like that's a pressure that we're forcing upon them. So this slide is kind of important for a few reasons. First of all is that typically we see this one, and what it is showing body fat increases over time. Usually we see this slide, it's a flag or a map of the US. And we get the picture and we understand, but maybe it's hard to relate because we always maybe view Americans as, well, they're the obese ones and we don't really have a problem. But when it's about us, maybe it's more relevant and we can see. And so a few things to notice are that, from 2005 to 2017 or 18, everywhere in Canada has been getting more obese. However, if you think during those times, do we have access to more or less information? We'd say probably have access to more information. And are there more gyms? And are there more dietary supplements? Are there more medical professionals or gurus or whatever that, would claim to say, hey, this is how you do it? And so it's not a lack of information. You'd probably say there's probably never been more information available to us on the topic, but we are becoming more overweight and more obese. If we look at the color coding at the bottom, The dark green is less than 20% body fat. And then they go up by 5% to the light green, yellow, orange, and then red. And so, we can see that more and more areas are becoming, so anything over in that 25 to 30%, the yellow band, that's where we consider overweight. And we started getting into the orange and the red band. So now it's getting into where we're seeing obesity. And so, it is not just a US problem. We're probably aware of that, but it does apply to Canada, that it's not getting better with time. And it's not due to a lack of information or people that are willing to help us. And the other thing I think will be interesting the next time they do this is that what would it look like now, 2021 and 2022, where, we saw that people didn't move as much. There were restrictions, lockdowns, gyms closed. So physical activity decreased substantially in the last few years. So if we can see the trend is getting worse over time, how much more was that worsening condition accelerated in the last few years? So what is it that moves somebody to want to either lose weight or to get lean? Usually it's one of three things. It doesn't have to be limited to these three, but these are the top three. And that can be some type of a adverse medical condition. It can be something we experience personally, or it can be something that is a family member or somebody close to us. So maybe somebody has a heart attack or is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or some other type of autoimmune disorder. And it's close enough to us, if it's not us personally, that it rocks us, it has an impact, and it forces us to say, okay, I have to make a change. It can sometimes be brought on by, the weight creeps up, but it hits a certain threshold. And either it's a threshold we never expected to see, or it's an all-time high, and it's just that is enough to make an impact and get our attention. And, the other thing that can trigger somebody to make a change is seeing themselves in pictures or catching their reflection. Sometimes we may avoid being in pictures, and we avoid mirrors and seeing our own reflection. But when we do catch that, that can be sometimes shocking enough that, it's a hard truth to handle, but then it is something that maybe moves somebody to take action. So, but why would we care about being lean? Like, why does this matter? Well, there's a variety of reasons here. The first one is for longevity, and not just longevity. It's not just about having lifespan, but you want to think about it in terms of health span.
Increase,
you have a longer life potentially, but you'll have a more active, mobile, independent life as you add years. And so, very, very, I'm not sure if anybody, you can put your hand up or you can raise your hand and comment. But does anybody know?
Okay to continue watching on TV.
And, 80, 90 years old. And rarely is it even at 70. Like the number one thing that would get us if we're overweight, obese.
We have to change the source though now, maybe?
Are at risk for cardiovascular disease. So that's the number one benefit there for being lean. The other thing is that as we are leaner, it's easier to build muscle mass. And part of that has to do with our capacity, our ability to do the work to stress the neuromuscular system to build muscle mass. Those pathways are more efficient. We do a better job of building muscle when we're leaner. And also what we can handle and tolerate in terms of workloads is usually greater as well. And how we use nutrients for muscle protein synthesis. All of those things are better when we're leaner. So that's another advantage. Sleep apnea, usually as we see increased fat deposits through the throat, the larynx, and whatever that obscures that flow of oxygen, well, that interrupts our sleep, and one of the main reasons for sleep apnea. So as somebody that struggles with sleep apnea loses a little bit of weight or gets leaner, they usually will see that their sleep improves. If you think about people that go to the beach and you're more likely to want to take your shirt off. Like the young track athletes here on the right, like Mike, I don't think he wore a shirt all week at this camp. That was down in Santa Barbara, uh, a camp we did with Team
Me
Canada.
too.
And, he was a very confident young man. You can see that. And it reminds me too of, we had a client a few years ago. And when she was in the gym, when she first started, she would always have her hair kind of down and it would obscure her face. And she would kind of keep to herself and not very vocal. She wouldn't interact very much. And even her posture was a little bit smaller. And you can see that was a mask. It was trying to hide. And as she started to get healthier and to lean up, well, then the hair was pulled back and exposed the face. And then she started to smile more and to interact more with the coaches, other clients. You can see the personality come out. So, we don't want to just simplify confidence as to will we take our shirt off at the beach or not, but it has to do with how we carry ourselves and our posture and our comfortableness in terms of interacting with others and smiling more. So confidence carries over in a number of ways, but it's one of the nice benefits of being lean. During COVID, we saw that the people that succumbed and passed away, usually they experienced comorbidities prior. So these were people that either had cardiovascular disease, maybe they had some kind of they were immune compromised in some way. It could have been, immune related disorder, maybe diabetes, something along these lines. And a condition that was very common amongst those who succumbed was overweight or obese. And so, being leaner, obviously, we're less at risk for all those things, including COVID, less pain. When we think about the number one orthopedic procedure is to have somebody's meniscus scoped, in the knee, when we'll either damage or twist or hurt our knee. And then the friction from that meniscus, and if there's any frays or tears or nicks, and that creates pain, and they'll go in and they'll shave down, they'll clean up that meniscus, trying to alleviate pain. Now, and it can be successful and it can do wonders for a number of people. However, I would hope that the orthopedic surgeon would consider as well that every extra pound of mass that the individual carries is 4 pounds of pressure on the knee. And so if someone presenting with knee pain and is being considered as a candidate for any kind of a meniscal repair, knee replacement, ACL reconstruction, any of these type of things, where when pain is the main complaint, to say, well, if the individual is overweight, obese, if they were to lose 10, 15, 20 pounds, that could be up to 80 pounds of pressure off the knees. And that it's going to substantially alleviate and maybe not eliminate the pain, but maybe make it less enough that surgery is not warranted. Something called, it's the era of privilege, I guess, right? And so as the white male, I might talk more about my privilege. And when you're lean, you can get away with, you can go when you're an all-inclusive, not impact you in the same way. It's not fair, but it's true. Similar to, I could go to Vegas this weekend and drain, and play whatever number of chips on there. And if I get to a high stakes table and I'm betting $500 or $1,000 a hand, and I lose $50 or $100,000, that could be catastrophic. Bill Gates could probably go do the same thing and you would have zero impact, And so in a similar way that when you reach a certain level of wealth, little investments and things like that, or little expenditures don't really harm you and you won't feel any of the side effects. In a similar way, when you get leaner, you can indulge, you can relax the efforts, and you can have some fun, and it doesn't impact you as much either. So that's what we mean by lean privilege. And then the last two, they relate a little bit more to athletic performance. Relative strength means how well can you move your body. So if an individual can do 2 or 3 chin-ups or pull-ups, and that same individual is able to lose 20 or 30 pounds, we're probably going to see that their relative strength, like how many repetitions they can do of that exercise, that's going to go up. That makes sense. And so that's all kind of body weight exercise. For me, it's a body weight squat, a chin up, a pull up, a Turkish get up, whatever it might be. But if it involves moving your body, you can do that more easily and with more output when you shed some weight. And obviously, if we're measuring speed and getting from point A to point B, if I'm going to do a 100-meter dash and I put it on a 40-pound weight vest, I don't expect to run as quickly that if I ditch the 40-pound weight vest. So our relative speed goes up. So that's a consideration for any athlete that, you know, their sport is judged on getting from A to B. So you think of swimming, track, triathlon, these type of things, cycling. You have to move your body. If you have less mass to move, your speed goes up. So a number of advantages. So if we get into now, okay, well, what do we do to get there? Like, what are the best ways? How do we get lean? Really, it comes down to three things. And in the first part, there's two kind of conditions there of we want to create a caloric deficit. So at the end of the day, the amount of calories that go in should be less than the amount of calories or energy that the body burns or consumes. And that comes down to a couple of things that we try to manipulate with our nutrition, our training. We need to reduce the inputs a little bit, you know, and we ought to be, again, put the context on there. More is not better. When you go into a severe restriction or you try and do it too quickly, can have adverse health effects. So it might be riskier. It might not be a good idea. And I'll explain a little bit more later on as to how much of an energy reduction we're looking for. But the second thing, we don't want the pace to be too quick either. There's a certain pace where the body will accept it and allow us to get leaner, and you try and go too fast, body will override that and put restriction on it. And then we want to increase that energy expenditure, and that's done through exercise. The second thing there that we can do that's within our control is we want to optimize our sleep, and think about that in terms of how well do you sleep, how much do you sleep, and are your sleep habits, you know, regular. That last condition can get a lot of people because, you know, we might have we've had young clients and young individuals, young professionals in their 20s and 30s. And during the week, they said, yeah, they're very good. They get to bed at 10:30 and they sleep till 6:30 and they get 8 hours a night, you know, from Sunday until Thursday. And the Friday and Saturday, well, they really want to live their best lives. And they're out till minimum 1 a.m. and some say as late as 2:30 or 3. And then they try and turn that around for Sunday night back onto the routine. Now, where else? So 2 nights out of 7, if you really blow it on your sleep, I'll explain later why sleep matters to get lean. But if you really wreck it 2 out of 7, you know, it's almost 30%. So imagine anything in life where something changed by 30%, like if, you know, mortgage rates were going up and if they announced tomorrow that crime is going up from, if it's at 4 or 5%, it's going to go up to 34, 35, people would freak out. Or if your boss would say, yeah, we're reducing your check by 30%, or your financial planner, I lost 30% of your portfolio. Nowhere else in life would we be okay with giving up 30%. But unfortunately, we see a number of people doing that with their sleep and not seeing it as not be concerned or recognizing that's a big rock. That's a easy way to get lean, is getting that short up. So the first part there is we want to, well, first let's back up a little bit. These are some of the popular things that people will do to try and get lean. And so they may eat fewer carbs. You know, when I sit down with people and do a strategy session, and I'll do anywhere from 3 to 10 of these a week. And sometimes, you know, I guess up to 50 weeks, that could be 150 to 500-600 of these a year. And now having done them for 20 years, you know, we can do the math. Like I've talked to probably thousands of people about what they do and what their approach is, what they try to do to lose weight, and knowing that that's the number one goal. A lot of people do express they would like to lean up. And a lot of them say they're trying to eat fewer carbs, low carb, keto. Some of them try to eat less fat. Some of them use intermittent fasting. They're trying to eat less frequently. There's others that, you know, they've gone vegan or vegetarian. They believe that's the way. Others still will use different type of cleanses. Maybe they've added a supplement, and it could be ephedra, caffeine, something like that, not long, or some other dietary approach, maybe the Mediterranean diet, maybe it's the Zone or Sears or Weight Watchers or whatever. There's a variety of approaches, but as we saw in that early slide, it doesn't seem to be working. And here's the thing, like carbohydrates are really vilified and people try and avoid them like the plague. The slide is interesting because on the left side, it shows our carb intake, which, we can see that black line. It has been approaching or increasing kind of through the early 2000s. But since the 2000s until about 2010, when they were tracking this, we've reduced our carb intake by, almost 10%. But during that same period where we started to reduce carb intake, obesity rates went from the high 20s to 35 into obesity. So if carbs were the culprit, we should see obesity and the percentage of adults living with obesity, that should be tracking in parallel with carbohydrates. So that's the take-home message, that it's not carbs that are the problem here. All right. This slide, I think it's kind of interesting because if somebody wants to be low carb, so to put it in a context, when something in the literature and research, when they refer to it as a VLCD, or that's the term for very low carbohydrate diet, that's 40% of your calories coming from carbohydrate. Ketogenic can be 5% or less of your calories coming from carbohydrates. So keto can be 8 times fewer carbohydrate than very low carb. But so the diet names all on the left there, from low carb, keto, low fat, intermittent fasting, Weight Watchers, or paleo. And then they all kind of give a little brief description: eat fewer carbs to no carbs, avoiding fats, restrict your eating to certain hours, using a point system, or eating only minimally processed Paleolithic foods. And then what's really interesting, I find really interesting on the right, how do they all work? They all create a caloric deficit. Okay, that's the take-home message here. You can be vegan, you can be vegetarian, you can be keto, you can be who you want to be. But in the end, why they work is they create a caloric deficit. One asterisk or whatever to put on there is we're talking about this in terms of getting lean and maybe a weight loss goal. There are some of the approaches work better for others, depending if it involves health or these kind of things. For example, if somebody was, a cancer patient and getting oncology treatments and whatever, ketogenic low carb might be a better approach. There's some good research showing when you go to very, very low carb diets for cancer patients, that can be very effective in their treatment plans. So not necessarily one is better than the other. It should be something that you can fit into your schedule that works with what you like to do. If somebody is, say, a traveler and they fly multiple times a month or maybe even more than once a week, maybe intermittent fasting is a good idea because you're not getting great food on the plane or in the airports. Maybe that's a good strategy. So making it fit your lifestyle, considering health, but then just understanding in the end, they all work because they create a caloric deficit, not that fats are evil and carbs are evil or this or whatever. That's not the point, okay? So when we are looking to create that caloric restriction, so if we understand that, that's point number one, is to have success, we have to eat a little bit less, okay? However, when we do that, we should increase our protein intake, okay? We want to spare that muscle mass, that fat-free mass. That's essential. So what this study looked at was to say, if you increase protein during caloric restriction, so when you're eating less and you increase your protein, what happens? So they looked at 2 groups. One group was eating 2.4 grams per kilogram of fat-free mass or body weight per day, or the other group half as much protein. The group that eats higher protein, they keep 12 times the amount of lean mass. So when we lose weight, when we lose mass, average individuals, like normal weight individuals, they lose, out of all the weight they lose, up to 35% of that can be fat-free mass. 35% can be muscle mass. So if you lose 10 pounds on the scale, it's not 10 pounds of fat. If you are normal weight or already pretty lean, you're losing more muscle mass, okay? So you might lose 6.5 fat, maybe 3.5 of muscle mass. Somebody who is overweight or obese, they're going to lose more fat mass and less muscle mass because they have more fat mass to lose, okay? So the nice thing here is when you up your protein, you're going to keep more of that hard-earned, essential, and very beneficial muscle mass, lean mass. They also lose more fat when they increase their protein. The last comment to make on this is that 2.4 grams per kilogram of body weight, you need that much protein. That's a lot of protein. Like the RDA is 0.8. That's what most people are encouraged to eat a day. So this is triple that amount. So it is a lot. And that's why right at the front of the gym, that's why I have protein there. Really, I'm trying to make it very obvious and recommend and get people to try it. And also remember, it's a supplement. It's in addition to, but that's the take home is that the RDA or the recommended amount is 0.8. Most people don't eat that. But even if they went to 1.2, it saves only so much muscle and you don't lose as much fat. And if you can increase it a little bit more beyond that, you'll save even more of your muscle mass and lose more fat, okay? So here's another kind of study looking at it in a similar way, but rather than looking at it as 1.2 grams or 2.4 grams per kilogram body weight, they just looked at it as servings of, you have a 15-gram whey protein serving or 30 grams. So when you double it, what happens? And this is during energy deficit, meaning if your body needs 2,000 calories a day, you're eating less than 2,000 calories a day. So you're in a deficit, energy deficit, and you're also lifting. That's the important condition as well. So you need to keep up the resistance training. So when they have 15 grams, they see a 16% increase, and MPS is muscle protein synthesis. So the synthesis of new muscle mass, okay? It's more than doubled when you have 30 grams of whey, right? So again, kind of trying to make that point when you reduce your caloric intake, up your protein, okay? So the other part of the condition here, so we're saying we have to create that caloric deficit, but the other part of it is we have to exercise more. Resistance training is going to be our best bang for the buck. When we look at it, that there's a certain amount of calories you'll burn when you do cardio, and a certain amount of calories that you'll burn when you do weights. You burn slightly more calories when you do cardio. It's not significantly different. It's not a huge amount, but it is more than doing weights. The reason we want to do weights, however, is that it keeps and it preserves that muscle mass. And it's so important. When you look at how intensely somebody works out, the training, it should have some intensity to it. So when somebody exercises, and this is cardiovascular exercise, it was cyclists, and whether they do 400 calories of exercise or 600 calories of exercise versus a group that's the control that did nothing, and it's at 70, 80% of your max heart rate, and it was a 10-month study. So good longevity, good length to the study. It wasn't like we did it 2 times and called it. No, they went on it for a while. The group that does more exercise, they lose more weight and they lose more body fat. So the group that does 600 calories of exercise, they lose 11.5 pounds versus 8.5. So you're almost losing 50% more weight. And in terms of the body fat percentage they're losing again almost 50% more. So make sure that there is a dose of intensity there. This is based on cardiovascular exercise, not as effective. It should be resistance-based, but just showing intensity matters. Okay? So with the diet and exercise, majority of weight loss comes from dieting and not exercise. Somebody can achieve a weight loss goal just by dieting. They usually will not achieve that if they just exercise. However, results are better and you keep your muscle mass when you exercise. Remember, it's not the 2 parts. We have to lose fat mass, but we want to maintain or increase muscle mass. And if you do this as nutrition with no exercise, you lose the weight, but of that weight you're you're going to lose muscle mass. So that's why you have to do it with exercise. When you start out though, don't overdo it on the exercise. Overweight or obese people, they'll have low exercise capacity. They can usually only expend 200-300 calories a session. So work up to that, or more the emphasis on the nutrition and maybe on shorter or more frequent workouts rather than on marathon sessions. Like don't start training for a half marathon or a triathlon. If somebody was overweight or obese, it's not the way to go. Get the nutrition in order, slowly introduce the exercise, gradually build up as capacity allows. The best results, they do come when you combine the two. If you only do cardio, you see a greater loss in that fat-free mass in your muscle mass. But if you reduce your intake too much, so if you cut your calories too much, or you participate in only cardio, they lose that fat-free mass. And that means that resting energy expenditure or your metabolism, it slows down too much. So what makes it hard, people sometimes lose weight to a certain point, plateau, and they get stuck and they keep working harder and more deficit. That moves more muscle mass and it gets harder and harder as you go. So up your protein, have resistance exercise. Okay. So in terms of like, how does the sleep tie into this? Well, when we get 6-7 hours of sleep per night, and that helps balance out a couple of hormones, a couple of key ones. So leptin and ghrelin. Now, leptin, that hormone, it sends a message to say, I'm full, okay? I don't want any more. When we're sleep deprived, we don't get that message. That hormone is impaired. And so we might be full, but we haven't had that message from that hormone. So we don't get the message that we're full. So we keep eating. So you've reached a point of satiety or fullness, leptin is impaired, you keep eating past. Once you get your sleep in order, when you're no longer sleep deprived, you eat to a certain point, leptin is released, tells you you're full, that's good enough, stop, and you do stop eating. Ghrelin, that hormone, the message there is telling you you're starving, you need to eat now. And so when we're sleep deprived, that message is getting amplified and it's screaming at you all the time. So somebody who's sleep deprived, mid-afternoon is saying, I'm starving, I need something. And usually they're going to crave coffee, an energy drink, something sugary, because they feel like they're getting that message of ghrelin so loudly coming through, it's telling you're starving, you need to eat now. But once they get that sleep in order, message of ghrelin is start to come down a little bit, and you can manage through those periods where normally you'd get that mid-afternoon or whenever it strikes you, hunger. When our sleep is obviously regulated, or when we're getting better sleep, we have more energy for training. It also stimulates the part of the brain known as the insular cortex, and that part of the brain, one of the functions is it's our willpower. So do you want the treat or not? You know, the cookies there or the ice cream or the chips or whatever you want. If you are sleep deprived, then we're not getting that message, okay? And so our willpower is going to be suppressed and you'll go for the treat. When you are well rested, the insulin cortex there, it's functioning well and it's telling you, no, you don't need that. Your willpower is stronger, okay? The other thing, when we are sleep deprived, that's going to suppress, or sorry, when we are well rested, that helps suppress the amygdala. So that's your reward center of the brain. So if it's not suppressed, it's telling you you should have a treat, you should reward yourself, your cravings are coming through just on steroids, and it feels like it's hard to say no. So the amygdala and insular cortex, they're different but related in that sense. One is if your willpower is suppressed, and the other one is telling you like the angel and the devil on your shoulders, right? You can think of those two hormones in that way, but they are tied in with your sleep. So we're hearing quite often that we are always thought 8 hours of sleep, got 8 hours of sleep. Well, first, that's very difficult for a lot of people to do. And instead, we should be saying maybe 7 hours is just as good as this research shows. And what we see, if we look on here, the vertical axis is tracking our weight. So our mass going from on the left there, 75 kilos or 65, 70, 75, and 80 kilos. And then just over the past 16 years, as they've been tracking people who get 5, 6, 7, or 8 hours sleep. So the take-home message here is that, can you see how 7 and 8 hours, it's pretty, almost the lines are superposed. You almost can't tell the difference between those two colors. So getting 7 hours is adequate. All right. It doesn't have to be 8. If 8 works well for you and you're in that habit, or you feel like with 7, you're groggy, cranky, irritable, hard to function, performance drops off, these type of things, okay, get a little bit more, but 7 to 8 is the goal. But we don't want more. And here's why, is that they're seeing that people are sleeping over 9 hours, you're 21% more likely to become obese. So sleep is important, but 7 to 8 is the magic number. Don't go more than 8. And once you start getting over 9, now we're seeing people are going the wrong way on this, and they start to lose the benefits, and they actually become at risk for going obese. So when we are cutting off our nutrition at the end of the day, so we don't want to eat too close to when we go to bed. And the reason being is that if you're having something to eat before, it takes you longer to fall asleep. And ask a number of clients that when you go to bed, do you fall asleep right away? And there's a number of people that say, no, it takes me a while to drift off. And I know that for myself, the nights where I don't eat right before bed, I sleep better. And if I have had something to snack on or whatever, sleep overall is not as good a quality, and it does take me longer to fall asleep. So in this case, almost like, it might not seem like much, but 15 minutes more or 12 minutes more of tossing and turning can feel like an eternity when you are really, really tired. You just want sleep to come. And also then the quality of the sleep, it's about 12% better quality sleep. So that REM stage, that rapid eye movement, when we dream and we do a lot of the recovery that we get from training and the benefits, we're getting about 4 minutes more, or about 12% better improvement if you can limit the pre-bedtime snacks. You fall asleep more quickly and you have better quality sleep. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up here with some of the strategies and things that really lead to long-term weight loss, because that's the key. We don't want to see people having rebound. They lose weight, and next year they put it back, and then some, they try again, and they just fall into this cycle, this vicious cycle of lose and regain some more, and then lose again. So this is for people who have lost 5% or more of their mass. So if somebody was 200 pounds, they're losing at least, 10 plus pounds, and they've kept it off for at least a year. The conditions, and this is from a couple of different studies, and try to amalgamate them. They create that energy deficit, but it's not severe. So we don't want to see people that are, oh yeah, I'm eating 600 calories a day, 800 calories a day, 1,200 calories a day. Probably the minimum is probably 13 to 1,400, okay? And it should be, no more than a 500 to 700 calorie deficit. If somebody has more weight to lose, yeah, they can be more to that 700 calorie end. And somebody who's already a little bit leaner, doesn't need to lose or have as much to lose, then it should be closer to the 500 calorie end, but nothing beyond that. It does work to lower fat intake a little bit. The first thing we want to do is make sure you get your protein up. Throughout the rest of your calories, usually about 55% can be as carbohydrate, and the balance can be fat, but we want it to be a lower fat intake. And the reason being that the energy from a carbohydrate and a protein, they're roughly 4 calories per gram. However, fats carry 9 calories per gram. So you have 225% more energy for a gram of fat compared to carbs and protein. So if you can eat lower fat, that can be advantageous. Increase your dietary fiber, increase your exercise, your physical activity. Self-monitoring. This could be journaling. This can be, meeting with the coach. You can be one of our coaches either. If you'd like to do that, let us know. And, take a few minutes at the start of the session or around that, and just to check in, how are things going? What is your biggest challenge? What's the lowest hanging fruit, something we could help you with? And what did you learn from that after you tracked it for a week? And one of the habits is typically people who have the success, they don't skip breakfast. It helps them to get more going for the day. People who eat more at breakfast, typically eat less later on in the day, as opposed to those who, if they skip breakfast, usually they'll eat more at lunch and then as well at dinner. Some of the other another review here from Kreider. These were kind of some of the traits of the people who, again, managed some successful weight loss. So none of the people who have that success are eating fast food. 87% remove low nutrition food. And this just means like candy and chips and chocolate. 83%, they're eating more fruits and vegetables. 80% are weekly monitoring of weight, similar to that previous study. So that can be journaling, checking in with a coach. It doesn't have to be stepping on the scale. And sometimes stepping on the scale, it's a number. If you're looking at a body transformation and you lost 3 pounds of fat and you gained a pound or 2 of muscle mass, you might get frustrated and see the net change after 6 or 7 weeks is 1 pound and think, oh, I'll quit. So there's some limitations with just using the scale. 76% increased physical activity. Again, we are saying that's to preserve that fat-free mass. We want to hang on to the muscle mass. And the self-monitoring of eating, okay? Again, what are some of the other features of long-term success? 20% overweight individuals are successful at keeping the weight off. So, and it's unfortunate, but maybe it's not surprising. We all know somebody who has tried to lose weight, and only 1 in 5 can keep it off for more than a year. Here, the strategies from this study where they were finding is that low calorie, remember I was saying it's 1,400 calories. It's not, 1,000, 1,200. That's about the lowest we want to see people going, okay? Increase your physical activity. Try and get, if you can walk for an hour a day, if you ride the bike, if you coming into the gym or whatever, set that as a goal. Again, this is just one of the studies, but they're saying they do have their clients weigh frequently. Eating breakfast came up. That was another tactic. The ones that don't succeed or don't have success, they're underestimating their intake by 20, 30%. So their intake is closer to 1,800 a day. And that can come, sometimes it's not so much as a dishonest omission of telling a coach or dietitian or someone what they're eating. It's the devil's in details. Oh, I had 2 cups of coffee, and they forget to mention that with 2 teaspoons of sugar and a cup of cream. Or I made all the kids, or I made all the dinners, and as I was making it, I was sampling the pasta as I needed. And also when dinner was over, rather than scoop all the plates into the garbage of what the kids didn't eat, I finished their plates as well. So these kind of things can sometimes lead to underreporting. And also the ones who don't succeed, they tend to eat out about 2.5 meals a week. When you eat in, when you make more of your own meals, you are controlling the portion, you're controlling the quality, you're controlling the freshness, you're controlling, what goes into it. Oh, now it's in your control as opposed to somebody else. So when you make more of your meals, stand a better chance of succeeding. The longer you keep it off, the greater chance to keep it off forever. And the consistency is key. So when you looked at people who followed a healthy approach, remember, we're trying to create a caloric deficit, we're trying to increase physical activity, and we're trying to regulate sleep. So when we're doing those 3 things, there's some people that do it well during the week. There's others that are weekend warriors, and maybe they just get their exercise and they really try and ramp it up on the weekends. And then there's the third group that, they're just doing it all the time. It's weekday, it's weekend, and, you still want to enjoy life. You still have indulgences. You still want to go to Christmas parties and these kind of things. But the group that does it all the time, they're 1.5 times more likely to maintain that weight. Okay, so it just has to be something like, I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm not getting them clean, throwing away the toothbrush. I hang on to this toothbrush, and when I go to the dentist, I get a new one, but you do it day in, day out. And that's the same mindset you have to apply to this. With looking at the differences between individuals that lose weight. So sometimes somebody are like, oh, it must be easy for you. And yeah, unfortunately, there is that lean privilege. It is easier for leaner people. But when We mentioned this a little bit earlier. Normal weight individuals, when they lose weight, they lose about 35% muscle mass of the weight they're losing. Obese people, it's around 20-30% of the mass they're losing is muscle mass. And unfortunately, women, they lose more muscle mass than women. So, that should be a light bulb for women to say, even more crucial for women to get onto a resistance training program and up their protein if they're looking to get lean, because you're already at a sex-linked disadvantage according to men or relative to men. And I know a lot of women that they do get frustrated. That's like, oh, my husband, he can just whatever gets started, he loses it and it looks great. And unfortunately, it's true, but it doesn't mean it's hopeless. It just means we just have to be aware of it. You have to lift weights, up your protein, be consistent. And protein less than 0.8 grams per kilo MD results in a loss of fat-free mass. Remember, 0.8, remember I said earlier, that's the recommended amount. So if you're just eating the recommended amount of protein while you're in a caloric deficit, doing resistance training, you're losing muscle mass. So that's when you're in that caloric restriction. Inadequate protein augments that loss of fat-free mass or that muscle mass. So what interesting, I'll kind of leave you with this. I think we all kind of like coffee. So maybe something that's a little bit fun or give you a little bit of hope and not all doom and gloom. But 3 groups here. And there was one group that was just control. They didn't do anything. The other group, they did the exercise, but they also had some caffeine. And the other group, third group, sorry, they exercised and their drink was just a placebo, no caffeine. The caffeine group, there was greater energy expenditure. Their bodies burned more calories. They burned more fat. And the exercise they didn't feel as hard. Okay. So the energy expenditure at rest, so this is outside of doing exercise, was 420 calories versus 360. So, if you look at, it's around 1/6, right? So, 16% more energy being burned at rest. And eating after exercise, if you had caffeine and exercised, you eat fewer calories and substantially less. Like here, we're looking at almost 800 calories difference of the group that is having caffeine when they exercise. They eat less during the day than the group that exercised with placebo. So that's everything I had planned for you guys. Just to kind of summarize that, it's create a caloric deficit nutritionally, eat a little bit less, get your protein intake up first, eat, maybe up to 50-55% of carbohydrate, and the balance can become as fat, a low-fat diet. Increase your physical activity, exercise a little bit more, get your sleep in order, and just recognize that it's something where the consistency of it, it's what works. It's not making a severe reduction. It's not trying to do things really quickly. I didn't put a slide in and talk about that, but you're aiming for about a half to maybe 1 kilo per week, or sorry, per pound per week, right? So we're not trying to have somebody lose 5-10 pounds a week or 30-40 pounds a month. Like that drives me crazy when if anybody wants the references, whatever, I'm happy to share them. But when you see online on social media and people are saying, oh, here's my client, so-and-so, and lost, 27 pounds in this first month, or here's this one in only 2 months or in 50 days, dropped 37 pounds. I feel so badly for those people because we know that they're losing so much of their fat-free mass. And initial changes in mass, if somebody was in the habit of eating a lot of carbohydrate, and here's where carbohydrates get vilified, every gram of carbohydrate takes 4 grams of water with it, right? And a slice of bread or something, if somebody's eating, say 300 calories or 300 grams of carbohydrate today, there are 1,200 grams of water going with that. So if there's 454 grams in a pound, and just by reducing 300 calories of carbohydrates, they're shaving off 1,600 grams per day. You're dropping 4 pounds a day, but it's water weight. So when you see these really fast reductions in mass, when you see people aren't doing it combined with resistance training, when you're seeing that it's extreme and real quick cuts and whatever, just like that's not the way. That's going to lead to rebound. That's going to lead to a lot of losses in fat mass or in fat-free mass and muscle mass. And they're going to suffer problems down the line. So if you guys have any questions, feel free. You can unmute yourself, jump in. If it was something we didn't cover that's relevant, let me know if it's something on there. But either way, I'll just take a moment and let you guys go ahead here.
I actually had one question about, like for me, how much protein I should be eating a day, or like what I should max out at, because if you go according to the 2.4 grams per kilogram, that's like 300 grams of protein a day for me. That seems like a lot.
Sure. Okay. So that's a great question, James. One thing I didn't mention during this call, but maybe you've either heard me say it in the blogs, newsletters, or during the training. For health, this is more my take on it, my belief. We want to avoid acute changes. So if you could lift 100 pounds today, I don't want to give you 200 pounds next week. And if you could run 5K, we're not going to a 10K, like no acute changes. So first thing we want to figure out is, what do you eat for protein currently? What types, how much, how's it spread out during the day? From there, let's look to increase it and increase it gradually. Not something where it's we're doubling it or whatever. But if you were eating 80 grams a day, okay, and maybe that's spread over 3 meals, and you're getting roughly 25-ish grams per meal, that'd be around 75. Say, okay, can we take that to 30 or 35 grams a day and get you to maybe 105? Okay, and then gradually increase that. And when you make a change in exercise, in nutrition, everything, only change one thing at a time. Because let's say we said, okay, well, we're going to start taking this supplement and we're going to increase your protein and we're going to do this and this and this. And we're tracking. After 2 weeks, you find out, yeah, I got a great outcome or result. But what was it? You know, what worked? So only change one thing, make it small, don't make it acute, do it for 2 weeks, reevaluate. And when you evaluate, you can do it on a variety of different ways. So it can be based on body fat, it can be based on waist circumference, waist to hip ratio, or mass. And sometimes the best is all 4. And if you see it, you know, further to that, getting blood work done and anything else, that's even better. But just what you can do simply is body fat, a scale, a waist, and a hip to waist ratio. Then we can say all 4 of those conditions of those markers improved. Great. Keep doing what you're doing. Or we just nudge it up again and see, does it continue? And continue going until you get close to what that upper level limit could be, or what works for you is fits into your lifestyle and schedules and things like that.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I'll make the link available for anybody, you know, that from tonight. And I know there were some that they wanted to jump on this, and I know even some of we have some clients in the States, and this wasn't intentional. I put it on Thanksgiving for them. So, you know, I know there's a few that they were interested that said, yeah, Thursday's not the best night. Like, well, why not? Anyway, so there will be others that will watch it later. And so if you want to go back and watch anything like that, but I'll hang out online. If you guys have any questions, jump in. If not, thank you. Thanks for coming on here. Hopefully that helped to clarify a little bit in terms of, you don't have to cut out carbs completely. You don't have to become vegan. You don't have to. If that works for you and it satisfies a caloric deficit and it's a healthy approach, you don't mind doing it. Keep going. The other thing is increase your activity a little bit, and you're on the right track. Thank you, France.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Take care.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
You too.
You too.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Hope there was some info there that helped.
You bet. Lots of good information. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll see you.
Thanks. See you next week.
Goodbye. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Mom.